Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Pete here with MixBetterNow.com, and today I want to talk about phase cancellation in your mix. I want to show you what it is, I'm going to show you how to identify it, and I want to show you how to correct it. Let's check it out. All right, so phase. Phase is such an important yet often overlooked element when mixing. Now, for me, phase is something that should always be checked before you start putting plugins on your tracks. Anything like that. I like to check for phase during my static mix or right before I gain stage. So I have a session here. I have no plugins on. As you can see, everything's bypassed or off, completely off, okay? I was checking out some drums, I was listening to some things, and I noticed we were having some phase issues. So for those of you who are asking what is phase and you haven't heard of this before, I just Googled phase cancellation and a really great definition came up, and it says phase cancellation is an audio phenomenon where the waves of multiple tracks work against each other to eliminate certain frequencies. The resulting sound is often flat or dull. So essentially, if you think about it, anytime you're multi-miking anything, so very commonly put, drums, stereo miking an acoustic guitar, stereo miking or multi-miking a guitar cabinet, it takes the sound waves a certain amount of time to hit and reach each microphone. And if you don't set up your microphones correctly, you are going to experience phase cancellation. So I'm going to play a little bit of this for you. There's nothing going on. This is literally faders up, no plugins on, and then we'll dive into the drums. I'll show you what is out of phase, how I knew it was out of phase, and then what I did to get it in phase. All right, here we go.
Don't let me say it, Stella dear. The words are on my lips, but let me make it clear that though I'm eager to confess it,
Okay, so I soloed up the drums here. I want to focus on the drums because that is where I found the phase issues happening. So if we come and zoom in a little bit, we're going to look at some of these tracks. So what we have in the session is a kick in and a kick out mic. We have a snare top and bottom. We have a rack tom, we have a floor tom, and we have a mono overhead mic. So all of my tracks here are going, this is just my template setup. As you can see, everything's bypassed or off. So kicks go to kicks, snares go to snares, toms to toms. Everything comes to this drum bus here, and then I have a master drum level. Now, the easiest way to identify phase is with your ears, is with listening. Some people might say to look for phase, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But phase issues are very evident to hear, and it's a little bit deceiving because I have everything on the drum kit, and if we hit play, you're gonna notice that the drums sound pretty good. Right? I mean, so it's a really good drum sound considering it's just very minimally balanced. I'm not doing any compression, any EQing, any sweetening, anything. So the way that you can kind of check your phase is by going through to each drum or to multiple drums and thinking about the way a drum kit is mic'd up. So I like to use a sense of control here. So for me, the most important track in all of the drums here is going to be the overhead. Why? Because the overhead gives you basically the broadest landscape of the drum kit. In the overhead mic, we can hear the kick, we can hear the snare, we can hear the hats, the cymbals, and the toms, and a little bit of the room. So I like to use an overhead as a way to make my drum sound better versus purely a cymbal microphone, which some folks do. It's just a preference thing. Now, using the overhead, everything else that comes in should kind of get bigger and should start to sound enhanced. So if we solo the overhead, you're going to hear that we have a nice, like I said, a nice spatial image of the entire drum kit. Now, if we solo the kick, I always like to go through and solo, like when I get a session. It doesn't matter who I get a session from. They can be the best audio engineer in the world, the best recording engineer. They can be someone you don't know who hires you to do some work. You always have to check because recording drums, it's a difficult thing. If you've done it, you'll know. And things can change, all right? If you move something a little bit, it can throw off the entire sonic landscape of your drum kit. So I just wanted to listen to what everything sounded like, so I went ahead and soloed. Here's our kick in. Sounds great. Right? It's nice and big. We're getting a little bit of snare bleed in the kick-in mic, but that's okay for this type of music and this type of drum kit. I love mic bleed. Now, if we listen to the kick out mic, again, great sounding kick out sound, fantastic. Listening to the snare, this is the snare top, great sounding snare, and here's the bottom. So everything on their own sounds really good. Going back to the kicks. Now, in theory, when you have two kick mics that sound great, a kick in and a kick out, they both sound big. The kick in sounds nice and fat and punchy. The kick out also does, just in their own different way from having different mic placements around the drum. So if we solo the kick in and solo the kick out, in theory, when I solo them together, we should get a bigger kick drum sound. But we don't. They do not sound bigger, fatter, punchier, all of those adjectives when they are both on. So immediately I know there's a phase issue going on. So the way to check your phase, obviously the best way is using your ears, like I just did there. Just to reiterate in. So if I add the kick out, it should get bigger, but it actually sounds thinner with both of them on. So what I want to do is zoom in. So we're going to zoom in and look at the waveform because this is really where it gets important to analyze your phase. So we're going to zoom in quite a bit here. And on the top, we're looking at the movement of the waveform. So you can see there's a downward motion and an upward motion, and it continues. If you look at the kick in and the kick out, they should be moving in the same direction. So these humps, or whatever you want to call them, they should be perfectly in sync with each other, or very closely in sync, and they're in fact going in opposite directions. So being that they're going in opposite directions, it means that they're out of phase, and that's why we're getting phase cancellation. We're losing low end frequency because they are out of phase. There's a really cool image here on the Universal Audio site that shows perfect phase alignment in two waveforms and what it looks like on the top here. So you can see the upward and the downward movement is perfect, perfectly congruent in on both tracks. And on the bottom here, this is what two out of phase tracks look like. When one track is going upwards, the other one's going downwards, and and then the opposite for when it's down and up. So, excuse me. So, what we need to do is we need to pull open a plugin that has a phase invert button on it, okay? And very simply put, most plugins have a phase invert button on them. Lots of stock ones do. I'm pulling open the trim tool here in Pro Tools. This is stock with Pro Tools. One of my favorite plugins, actually, that comes with Pro Tools. It's great. I use it for gain staging sometimes, and of course for phase. So the phase invert symbol is this circle with a slash through it. And all we're going to do to flip the phase is to turn it on, okay? I also just want to make a little note here. I like to use the comment section on the left to kind of write down and make mental notes to essentially correct the phase, to know what is flipped and what is not, to know what is in or out of phase. Of course, you can pick up a pen and paper and do it that way. If you want to take notes on your tablet or on your phone, whatever works for you. Just make mental notes of which tracks you flip the phase on and, you know, which ones essentially are left alone. It'll help you out in the long run, and then that way you'll know and you won't forget. Anyway, so I wrote in phase flipped here on the kick out mic, and that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna flip the phase. So I'm gonna turn this on, and let's listen to how it sounds. Let me just zoom back out, and this is as we heard it before. And this is when I flip the phase of the kick out mic. Okay, no phase correction. Phase correction. Pretty massive difference, right? I mean, it's night and day. It's not even close. Now, I like to double check that, you know, the frequencies in conjunction with the overhead mic. So I'll bring in the overhead, and I'll make sure that that holds up in conjunction with the overhead. I'll bring so we're having just the kick in right now on the overhead. Okay, here's the kick out by itself with the overhead. This is the kick in and the kick out with no phase correction. And here is with the phase flipped on the kick out with the overheads. Pretty huge difference. It's not even close. You know, and when you hear it, you're just like, oh. So, you know, it's important to check phase. Moving on the kit here, I noticed the snare was also out of phase. So, we're going to keep the overhead on. We're going to turn the snare top on, and we're going to listen. So, you know, it sounds good. It's a solid snare top sound. We'll listen to just the bottom. Also a good snare bottom sound. Now, when they come in together, we are going to lose some of that size and some of that low end frequency. It gets super thin. Okay, so we're going to zoom in. We're going to take a look at the waveforms. Let's find a spot with a little bit more going on. Maybe we'll come here. So we're really going to zoom in. And again, we are noticing the same thing that we had with the kicks, is that they're out of phase. So again, we have the upward movement here, and the snare bottom's going down. When it's going down on the snare top, it is going up on the bottom. So we are going to flip the phase of the top. And it doesn't really matter if you do the top or the bottom, as long as you flip one. Now here I'm going to show you a different tool we can use. This is the Slate Digital VMR, the virtual mix rack. And this trim tool is free with the VMR, just as Revival. But what's great about the trim tool is it has this the phase flip on it, the phase reverse, they call it here, phase invert. It can be called a few different things, but it is all the same. So we're going to flip the phase. We're doing it 180 degrees here. And what that does when you flip it 180 is it essentially turns the movement or the whatever you want to call it of the waveform, the direction it's going in. It will turn it so that it is in sync with the other waveform, right? So that we have the perfectly congruent waveforms on top. If we turn it 180 degrees, instead of going down here, it will move it up so that it is in fact in phase. All right, let's take a listen to those together. This is with no phase correction. Here's with the phase flipped. Okay, I'm going to bring in the overheads just to make sure. We're going to turn it back off. Now here's the phase flipped. So much more bottom end right there. So now we've flipped the phase on the snare top. We've gained a lot more bottom end, a lot more punch, a lot more fatness back in our snare. Similarly to the kicks. Just want to show you guys as well, there is a bunch of different plugins that will have a phase invert or a phase flip button on it. So if you open the plugin menu on Pro Tools and you just go to the stock Avid stuff, there's a bunch of different things. Pull open the EQ3 and you're going to see there is a phase invert button here. Right by the input, you're going to see the circle with the slash through it. So if you want to flip the phase on that, you can certainly do it if you're EQing with the EQ3. All you got to do is just press that so it's on. And then you have the phase flipped, and when it is unlit, that means it is not flipped. So, very cool. Many different tools you can use to flip the phase. I'm going to go ahead and turn the VMR phase flip back on here. And I just want to take a look at the toms. Now, the toms aren't terribly out of phase. They're a little bit out of phase, and I want to show you another method that we can do to essentially get them a little bit tighter. Now, we're going to have to zoom in. And if we look at the waveform, it's not quite as bad. I want to get to a section where it's going to be a little bit bigger. So this is a great shot right here because you can see the snares. So here's the snare top, here's the snare bottom, and you can see that they're actually moving in the opposite direction, making them out of phase. But if we look at the first tom, here's tom 1 with the overhead. Now it's a little bit... the amplitude is not as big, so the waveform is not as big as the snare because the volume of the tom track isn't as big. Right now, all we're going to hear is mic bleed. So if I turn the tom mic on with the overhead, you're just going to hear the bleed of the tom mic. But nonetheless, I'm not cutting out the mic bleed in this track, so I need the entire tom track to be in phase. So there's a couple things we can do. Now, if we zoom in again, it's going to get a little bit smaller, but if we look at it, we have an upward movement down here on the overhead. Now, this is going to coincide with the snare. Okay, you can see where it comes up here and there's a snare hit right here. So what we want to do is we just kind of want to nudge this track back a little bit. We can tighten the phase up on here by just moving this. Okay, so we're just grabbing this, we have it in slip mode, and all we're going to do is try and line up the upward movement of the waveform with the upward movement of the overhead waveform. See how we did it right there? So now these are a little bit tighter. And we're going to do that again with this, the floor tom. So now if you look at these three, it's moving in the same, all three waveforms are moving in the same direction. So what that's going to do is tighten up the drum sound. If I undo both of those, it's a little bit thinner. And then if I re-nudge these, we're going to get a little bit of a punchier mic bleed sound, which in turn is going to give us a bigger tom sound when the toms come in. So if we play all the drum tracks together, let's zoom out and put everything on. We're going to have a nice, big, fat, punchy overall drum kit that's going to sound fantastic. Your mix will definitely thank you for it later because you have gone ahead and done some very important work for the drum kit. So later on when you start EQing and you start compressing and you start sweetening and doing all that kind of stuff, your drums are going to sound the best that they can possibly sound. Okay, I'm going to bypass the phase flips that we did. Now we'll turn it back on. And there you go. We have corrected our phase issues on our drums, which in turn gives us our low-end frequencies back, makes our drums sound a whole lot bigger, fatter, and punchier, and allows us to move forward with our plug-in processing. All right, so that's it for me, guys. My name is Pete with MixBetterNow.com. As always, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you guys watching. I hope you have an awesome day, and I will catch you next time.